There is incredible interest in what will happen to Penn State football, but the fundamental story of this horrific chapter should focus on the innocent children and the powerful people who let them down. There's also been much speculation on whether or not the NCAA has the authority to impose any type of penalty related to Penn State. Not only does the NCAA have the authority to act in this case, we also have the responsibility to say that such egregious behavior is not only against our bylaws and Constitution, but also against our value system and basic human decency. The Executive Committee, which acts on behalf of the entire association and implements policies to resolve core issues, along with the Division I Board, a body of presidents representing all of Division I, directed President Emmert to examine the circumstances surrounding the Penn State tragedy and, if appropriate, make recommendations regarding punitive and corrective measures. As a result of information produced from the Sandusky criminal investigation and the Free Report, which Penn State commissioned and also agreed to its findings, it became obvious that the leadership failures at Penn State over an extended period of time directly violated association bylaws and the NCAA Constitution relating to control over the athletic department, integrity, and ethical conduct. The corrective and punitive measures the Executive Committee and the Division I Board of Directors have authorized should serve as a stark wake-up call to everyone involved in college sports that our first responsibility, as outlined in our Constitution, is to adhere to the fundamental values of respect, fairness, civility, honesty, and responsibility. I'll now turn to President Emmert to discuss today's actions and what is expected of Penn State in the future. President Emmert.
The Penn State case has provoked in all of us deeply powerful emotions and shaken our most fundamental confidence in many ways. As we, the Executive Committee, the Division I Board, and I, have examined and discussed this case, we've kept foremost in our thoughts the tragic damage that has been done to the victims and their families. No matter what we do here today, there is no action we can take that'll remove their pain and anguish. But what we can do is impose sanctions that both reflect the magnitude of these terrible acts and that also ensure that Penn State will rebuild an athletic culture that went horribly awry. Our goal is not to be just punitive, but to make sure the university establishes an athletic culture and daily mindset in which football will never again be placed ahead of educating, nurturing, and protecting young people. More than 100 years ago, the NCAA was created to assure that sports are fully integrated into our colleges and universities, and that the athletic programs wholly embrace the values of higher education. Our Constitution and bylaws make it perfectly clear that the association exists not simply to promote fair play on the field, but to insist that athletic programs provide positive moral models for our students, enhance the integrity of higher education, and promote the values of civility, honesty, and responsibility. The sanctions we are imposing are based upon these most fundamental principles of the NCAA. With these intentions in mind, the Executive Committee, the Division I Board, and I have agreed upon the following sanctions. First, the NCAA is imposing a fine of $60 million on the university, with the funds to be used to establish an endowment to support programs around the nation that serve the victims of child sexual abuse and seek to prevent such abuse from happening. This amount is the equivalent of 1 year's gross revenue of the football team. Second, Penn State football will be banned from bowl games and any other postseason play for 4 years. Third, Penn State's football team will have its initial scholarships reduced from 25 to 15 per year for a period of 4 years. In order to minimize the negative impact on student athletes, the NCAA will allow any entering or returning football student athletes to transfer and immediately compete at the transfer university, provided he is otherwise eligible. Further, any football student athlete who wants to remain at Penn State may retain his athletic grant and aid as long as he meets and maintains appropriate academic requirements, regardless of whether he competes on the football team. Fourth, the NCAA vacates all wins of the Penn State football team from 1998 to 2011, and the records will reflect these changes. Fifth, the university athletic program will serve a 5-year probationary period during which it must work with an academic integrity monitor of the association's choosing. And finally, the NCAA is reserving the right to initiate a formal investigation and disciplinary processes to impose sanctions as needed on individuals involved in this case after the conclusion of any criminal proceedings. Beyond these sanctions, the NCAA is imposing other corrective actions to ensure that the intended cultural changes actually occur. The NCAA is requiring the university to adopt the formal reforms delineated in Chapter 10 of the Free Report, particularly Section 5.0. Additionally, the association is requiring Penn State to enter into an athletic integrity agreement with the NCAA and the Big Ten Conference. This agreement will require the establishment of a chief compliance officer position, a compliance council, and an array of control mechanisms that are intended to ensure the athletic culture will be fully integrated into the broader university. And finally, the NCAA will select an independent athletics integrity monitor who will, for a 5-year period, report quarterly to the NCAA, the university's Board of Trustees, and the Big Ten Conference. They will report on the progress Penn State is making in implementing all provisions of this agreement. Let me address also the issue of the so-called death penalty. The Executive Committee, the Division I Board, and I had extensive discussions about the appropriateness of imposing a suspension of football for 1 or more years. An argument can be made that the egregiousness of the behavior in this case is greater than any other seen in NCAA history, and that therefore a multi-year suspension is appropriate. After much debate, however, we concluded that the sanctions needed to reflect our goals of driving cultural change as much as apply punitive actions. Suspension of the football program would bring with it significant unintended harm to many who had nothing to do with this case. The sanctions we have crafted are more focused and impactful than that blanket penalty. Moreover, the actions already taken by the new chair of the board, Karen Peets, and the new president, Rodney Erickson, have demonstrated a strong desire and determination on the part of Penn State to take the steps necessary for the university to right these severe wrongs, and were appreciated by all of us. For the next several years now, Penn State can focus on the work of rebuilding its athletic culture, not worrying about whether or not it's going to a bowl game. With the sanctions imposed today and with the new leadership, the university, we hope, indeed we intend to ensure that that will be the case. In closing, let me say that this case involves tragic and tragically unnecessary circumstances. One of the grave dangers stemming from our love of sports is that the sports themselves can become too big to fail, indeed too big to even challenge. The result can be an erosion of academic values that are replaced by the value of hero worship and winning at all costs. All involved in intercollegiate athletics must be watchful that programs and individuals do not overwhelm the values of higher education. In the Penn State case, the results were perverse and unconscionable. No price the NCAA can levy will repair the grievous damage inflicted by Jerry Sandusky on his victims. However, we can make clear that the culture, actions, and inactions that allowed them to be victimized will not be tolerated in collegiate athletics. I'd be happy to take your questions.